Okay, we are live here on, what's the date today, David? It is April the 29th, right?
I believe it is.
Wednesday, April 29th. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to LUMA's Work From Home webinar series. I am really excited about today's conversation, because quite frankly, it's a topic that I think gets sort of short shrift. And so one of the aspects of this series, obviously, is yes, let's connect with the ecosystem while we're all working from home. Let's add some value by, talking through and getting operational experts to join us with conversations about trends that are hot in the marketplace, but also, besides the sort of the usual suspects trends, I think this is a unique opportunity to talk about things that don't necessarily, make all the, panel subjects at conferences, and talk about some things that we think are important and yet probably don't get discussed enough. And it's always great when we can have experts. Creative and the consumer is our topic today, and I have the very experienced and talented friend and longtime colleague, David Jones of You and Mr. Jones. Just as a reminder to folks that the Work From Home webinar series is every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, and we encourage you all to make that appointment TV, to quote a legacy term, to put it in your calendar, and we're sure to come up with something interesting every Wednesday at 2 o'clock Eastern. So here we are. This is the actual last episode in season 1. We've covered off a whole variety of topics relevant to the media and marketing and technology ecosystem. So here we are at Creative and the Consumer, the very last episode of season 1. And I am absolutely delighted to announce a world premiere here, folks, that yes, it turns out we have been renewed for another season. So look out, folks. The Work From Home webinar schedule for season 2 is chock full of all kinds of very interesting topics and some spectacular special guests that are going to join us for an exciting series of conversations. You'll see some more from us to market season 2 coming up. And
it's still free, I noticed.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, we're well into June here, folks. So understand that the whole rationale of doing this was to have something to talk about and stay engaged with whilst we were in this period of kind of lockdown. Now, look, this is, put it this way, this is a series, a streaming series that we would just as soon cancel as soon as possible. But we're planning for the long term, so we've got a full second season. Who knows? Maybe we'll cut the season short, including just as a promo for next week, Wednesday, May the 6th. I'm super excited to have, again, friend and longtime collaborator and colleague, Sheila Spence of Spotify. She runs strategy and corporate development at Spotify, who's been doing the lion's share of acquisitions and deals and partnerships in the podcasting space, as one of the stalwart companies, not an incumbent, a disruptor, but definitely one of the major players. And it just occurs to me, this whole webinar is about creative, and here I am with sort of season 1 creative. I am very lucky to have a team of producers, Ashley Holmes and Adam Platt, who have given us a new look for season 2. So there we go. Ladies and gentlemen, season 2, first episode, The Future of Podcasting, next Wednesday, May the 6th. And look, they're very good at their jobs. They don't just come up with static. Check out this promo. production quality's going up as I guess the budget goes up. I don't know. There is no budget. And in order to keep driving the formats. So enough with the promo. Let's get down to business. I have with me today David Jones, the founder and CEO of You and Mr. Jones. I've known David a long period of time. In fact, dating back to his time as CEO of Havas Media. And I have always found David to be one of those agency executives who kind of really got it in the sense that he was sort of self-aware enough to know what was real and what was kind of bullshit in the agency world, and no better timing. I think David exited the agency world 7 years ago, which I would call like perfect. To launch You and Mr. Jones, which has been described as a brand tech firm. And let's hear a little bit more about exactly what that's all about. David, talk to us about what You and Mr. Jones is and why you decided that was needed in the marketplace.
Thank you. Well, thank you for your kind introduction. No, look, I was running Havas and I could just see that all of our clients were looking for a new model. And I think everybody who's tuned in to this has probably done so because they see the world in a fairly similar way. But in essence, the mobile phone came along. It totally disrupted all marketing. It gave, it meant the brands needed to create huge amounts of new content, different formats. They had access to unprecedented levels of data. It turned every single individual on the planet into a content creator. And brands were just sitting there struggling, kind of going, I need help. And I'm not finding it because the big agency groups are very good at brand, but don't get tech. The tech companies are fantastic at tech, but will only ever want to recommend their tech, not someone else's tech, and they don't have the same interest in the brand piece. And what we really need is someone who can be an expert in both brand and technology. So we set out to build that group. We launched in 2015, in the summer of 2015, we raised $350 million to go build it. But in essence, we launched saying that we think you can do all marketing better, faster, and cheaper using technology. And that's what we're going to go and build for our clients. And today we're about 4,000 people. We're in 40 countries, and it's going very well so far.
The origin of better, faster, cheaper. Excellent. So I think you're the perfect guest today and sort of operational expert for a conversation of creative and the consumer. And you know what? I think where we need to start is with nomenclature. I've called this creative and the consumer. And David, your pushback was, I hate that term consumer. And you know what? Kind of so do I, right? I mean, about 4 years ago, we changed all of our LUMAscapes. We used to have the consumer on the sort of right-hand side. We changed that to just people because after all, we're talking about people, and it's a little bit sort of a lean in to suggest that they're necessarily consumers. What I've heard consumer, users, people. What's your sort of preferred term to reflect one of the principles in the marketing equation?
Look, so I mean, I think for us people, I mean, we tried to ban the word consumer when we had our chat when you were talking about doing this. And I wrote a piece quite a while ago about why we need to kill the consumer. And it was just after the financial crisis of 2008. And the point was, look, if you view someone as a consumer and call someone a consumer, you will think that their sole purpose in life is to mindlessly consume your advertising messages and then to rush out and buy your brand. And that's probably not a very good way to view people. And it's certainly not a way that any of us would be wanting to be viewed. So look, I think user, people, customer, but I just think consumer puts you into a certain mindset where you just don't look at them as people. You look at them as if they're just there for your ends and gain.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a very interesting segue into sort of where I want to sort of kick things off. And the framework I thought of using is to sort of think of creative and the consumer both in terms of where we've been and where we're going. Very much it seems that if we think back to sort of where we've been, I have a premise, love your input here, that the industry as a whole has not done a good job of sort of factoring in the primacy of people, of the users, of the consumer, in terms of much of the approach to the marketplace, in terms of ad formats, in terms of just how they even think about the intermediation of marketing products. We noted that in 2013, the IAB came out with a graphic, not to pick on them, but I mean, I think this is sort of emblematic of the entire industry, a graphic that was supposedly to represent the entire ecosystem with sort of like this crop circle display of all the different types of companies with brand in the center and all these different players surrounding that. And yet my core observation when this came out, about a minute after it came out, was where is the consumer? And I think it's sort of indicative of what I describe as the sort of inherent B2B centricity of the advertising industry.
There's actually quite an interesting comment on the chat from John Durham, who says that Stanley Marcus said, consumers are statistics and customers are people. Very nice.
Well said, as usual, from the Durham.
Yeah, I think most of us would probably believe that person or human or consumer, if you want to use that word, should be at the center of this, not the brand.
Right. Well, although, I guess, brands and people are what I would describe as the sort of the endpoints, if you will, on the LUMAscape, right? We talk about, there's a lot of talk about the supply chain and all the various players across what's sort of in between what I call the principles of the marketing equation. And I really think there are only two principles, right? There's the marketer, the brands, that are spending money in order to garner people's attention and hopefully consideration, and hopefully convert them into customers, paying customers, where they're going to make a purchase of the goods and services offered by the brand. And then at the other end of the spectrum is the consumer, the person lending their attention, lending their time to the brand, and ultimately they're the ones making the purchase decision. So whenever you see those waterfall sort of diagrams of the flow from dollars, often you'll see them from the marketer to the publisher. The reality is, the real true endpoints here are the marketer and the consumer, slash people, with just everyone else really is just an intermediary. And I think that came as a shock to many publishers, that they in fact were just an intermediary, a very, very important intermediary, mind you, but nonetheless an intermediary between these two principles of the marketer and the consumer.
But I think what's also really important about that is it's just how you stay relevant, because if you think the thing you do, and let's take the big traditional ad agencies, is make TV, you will carry on make TV commercials, you'll carry on doing that. And if people aren't watching them anymore and are now on mobile, you'll keep doing the thing you were doing versus watching people's behavior.
Well, you're absolutely right. And I think it's very instructive, right, for any players in business to think of themselves in terms of what they ultimately, the value that they ultimately provide. It's like book publishers. If you thought you were a book publisher, right, when the world shifted away from print and towards digital, and you still had a book publisher mentality, you were likely, going to suffer, because your view of what you did, who you were, was too narrow. It turns out it needed to be more agile. And I would argue that even suggesting you're a media intermediary may even ultimately be considered to be too narrow as well, because at the end of the day, you're a conduit, a vehicle through which marketers can deliver their messages to consumers. And if you take that sort of broader lens, maybe you have a better way to think about things, in particular as we see the kind of crushing inflective change that we've seen of late, which is, I think, really much forcing people to reconsider who they are and what their value is in the marketplace.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you're American Airlines, should you be looking to buy Zoom? Because if fewer and fewer people are going to be jumping on planes to go to their meetings, well, you know, are you really in the business of flying people, or are you in the business of helping business happen? You know, I think there's a whole bunch of interesting things we could pontificate about in that space.
That sort of takes it to extreme, but I think that's indicative, that's demonstrative of this question of, you know, how wide, what is the aperture on the lens in terms of identifying your place and therefore your value to the marketplace. So we got this fragmented supply chain. I mentioned 22 LUMAscapes, you know, 5,000 companies, and look, we've talked ad nauseum about the variety of issues that you know face us in this convoluted supply chain. You can almost, you know, hear Mark Pritchard, you know, talking at a conference about, you know, the B2B or marketer centric issues of like transparency, measurement, viewability, fraud, adverse context. We've hashed through these ad nauseum, and it seems as though just in the last 2 years, more of the consumer-centric or people-centric issues, primarily around ad avoidance and privacy, have sort of risen to the fore, where we're considering those issues a lot more. And look, you can see it in terms of what consumers are doing to avoid ads. They a full 50% almost of consumers in the United States have downloaded software to help them block ads. But forget about that, which I would consider to be like a hack to the problem. People are making more definitive choices via both audio and video subscriptions to really consume media more so on a SVOD or a subscription supported video on demand type of service or audio on demand type of service, as opposed to the more traditional channels that are ad supported. And look, you know, if people are making these decisions, these are economic decisions because there's a monthly cost associated with it. It really does indicate some kind of broken mechanism here in terms of what the ad industry is supplying and what people are interested in experiencing. And you know, it went so far that, you know, Scott Galloway suggested this was an advertising was becoming a tax that only poor people pay, to sort of frame that choice at its extreme.
I think he also said the technologically illiterate. But if you just look at how, you know, Netflix's share price has done recently, as everyone now thinks that their no advertising business model is complete genius.
Yeah, and yet it's undeniable, right? The move for the people that can't afford it to you know, proactively choose to pay up to experience non-advertising environments. You know, speaking of, you know, preferences for non-advertising environments, let's just think about, you know, kids, right? We know from our own examples with our kids that the young people, which is a cohort and a demographic we know that you are heavily involved with, David. But you know from your kids that, you know, they're mobile first, right? And they seem to be at the extreme, like intolerant of ads. They much prefer environments where they're free of the kind of interruptions that we grew up with and take as normal.
Yeah, but I think a lot of it is the fault of the ad tech industry, is that, you know, going back to viewing people as consumers, people did stuff with technology that was so irritating and so annoying, and actually way more annoying than anything that had happened in the sort of traditional advertising world. In my analogy was sort of people had grown up knowing that commercial breaks happened and you had to wait to see the thing you wanted to see. And then suddenly in the mobile world, you actually don't have to wait, and someone is forcing you to sit to watch something for 30 seconds. And it'd be a bit like someone running into your living room and jumping up and down in front of you whilst you're trying to watch something on the TV. And I think, you know, technology was used to do really dumb, annoying things, to follow people around the internet with sneakers that they just bought when they're the last people on earth who are going to buy that again. And I think it's, you know, it costs the ad tech industry dear.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, just think about you mentioned the retargeting example. I mean, if the privacy pushback was sorry, the what the industry said against the sort of privacy concerns was, well, our targeting and our audience based technologies provide more relevant advertising. That was at least what they said. In practice, largely what we saw, as you mentioned, was that pair of sneakers just follow us around the internet, which not only is not more relevant, or it's just downright dumb. And so I think consumers were by and large unimpressed with the sort of execution of targeting as manifested by this sort of low-hanging fruit of the 1.0 version of sort of ad tech's application. But you raise a good point about propensity, and we're big believers that modality really matters, because if you think about it, right, advertising was premised on this notion of interruption, right? You want to get to your content, you have to watch our message first, and I think that really changes depending upon where you are and what kind of mood you're in. If you're watching television and you're on a soft sofa and lounging back, maybe this notion of waiting 30 seconds while a marketer plays a short video for your content to come on is tolerable. Besides, you always have the second screen. It changes again when you're sort of at your desk and working at your computer, where you may be mildly annoyed by ads, or you just ignore them. But it becomes fundamentally different again when you're in the sort of mobile world. You're on the go. You use your phone as your sort of connectivity, your doing device, and it's a much more sort of active versus passive approach to media consumption. And in that context, where your mobile phone becomes the remote control of your life, well, shit, I think a full phone takeover of an interruptive ad would be seen as intolerable, as opposed to maybe mildly annoying or otherwise sort of accepted.
Yeah, I think it's actually not really rocket science. It's, if you annoy people with what you do with tech and with their data, they will have a problem with it. And if you add value, they won't.
Yep.
So you can hide your location from Uber, if we imagine we're back in the days where you're traveling on Uber, but or you can hide your location from Google Maps, but it's not very useful to you. Whereas I think all of us have brands and things that we love and are very happy to be engaged with, and then there are a ton of brands that we don't, and they will be different from everyone. And I think where technology has the opportunity is to create the perfect market. Yep. Where if brands are only spending to put their brand in front of people who either do like them or will like them, then they're not wasting their money. People are not annoyed, and the platforms that are carrying those messages do very well. And the perfect market does exist. The problem is we're a long way away from it today.
Right. Yeah, I think that people, consumers, people very much sort of make that choice as to to where, with whom, with which brands that they want to engage. It does, though, feel like we need to migrate away from this, somewhat at least, away from this notion of interruption as the sort of value proposition of advertising, to something that, I don't know, feels more akin to, say, facilitation, or at least, and I think we're seeing that already in terms of lighter ad loads. I think we'll see shorter ad messages depending on the medium. I think we'll see different sort of approaches to creative, and I look forward to talking about that. One other aspect that just we as deal makers noticed, and that is that there tends to be a big gap between sort of where we see innovation and investment activity in some aspects of advertising versus others. So we from a presentation I made 10 years ago, I identified the three components of advertising as being media, audience, and creative, that answered the three questions: where is your ad gonna show up? who are you targeting in terms of your audience, and what is the message or the creative that you intend to use. And of course, there's a whole ecosystem that goes and unifies into an ad buy. But if we just think of these three parameters from the standpoint of where we've seen investment and deal activity, well, media has seen a tremendous number of deals. These are just I just did a subset of just LUMA deals in the media ecosystem in the last 10 years, and there's been quite a few of those. Audience or sort of data-centric deals have also been prolific. Here's a large set of just, again, a subset of the deals that we've been involved with in that category, and compare that to creative, where, I mean, literally we did a couple of, dynamic creative optimization deals back actually at the founding of LUMA 10 years ago. And quite frankly, it's really been kind of crickets since then in terms of activity. What, David, would you ascribe that sort of disparity to?
I think it's because, it is for me the big one that's going to happen next. Is that there just hasn't been the level of innovation or the scale of companies created. And that, quite frankly, has been driven by the fact that you had a very big and successful industry in the traditional advertising world who were doing very well. And, as we all know, when businesses are doing well, they don't have to really reinvent themselves. And, Kodak is a wonderful example of that. When you've got a massive business selling photographic film, why worry so much about digital, except one day and become so much bigger. And so I think what's actually held it back is that the people who historically have been the experts in creative have sort of defined and looked at creative through a television lens, not through a technology lens. And I think what we'll see over the next decade is, an enormous amount of innovation and some very big companies built in this space. And as you see, the holding companies struggle more and more, and it's now a flat or declining industry, and that was pre-COVID. I think you're going to see over the next 5 to 10 years a huge wave of innovation in this space. So I would say it's to come. It's not that it hasn't really been a thing yet.
Yep. Well, that is it. That is a perfect segue to move away from the past and towards the future, because I concur with you that we've been long. Consumers had short shrift, right, as it relates to just the industry's thinking about creative. It hasn't had its share of sort of investment activity, and I think that is going to change. So here's just a smattering of different sort of types of applications of technology to creative that I concur with you. I believe we're on the precipice of a huge opportunity, in particular now that we are sort of understand what media is. We know what sort of data is, and I think there'll be plenty of more deals in both of those categories, but we've certainly seen a shift from media to data. And I foresee that we could very easily see a shift again to incorporate creative as people realize how important this is to the conversion, to the overall sort of marketing equation, and second is this increased operating leverage that is brought on by technology, right? We often think about creative as the sort of David Drogas of the world, these brilliant left brain or right brain sort of creatives who come up with these things, but they're very linear, and it doesn't particularly scale well. This notion of coming up with really awesome ideas for copy or formats or messaging or storytelling. But the reality is technology, I believe, and we'll hear from you, really can provide a lot of those sort of activities. One of the things that we observed is that, take AI, for example. Maybe we'll kick it off with AI. Historically, right, this computer applications and modeling really were applied to those left brain sort of math-centric problems of analytics and modeling and very sort of rote science-like applications. And really it's of late where we've seen AI start to have its application to more right brain concepts that historically maybe didn't have the leverage and or were seen as sort of human provided solutions?
Yeah, look, I mean, when I wrote the original business plan for the company, I had a vertical machine generated content. And I remember sitting there thinking, are people going to call bullshit on this and say, look, that's not a thing, David? And in the end, I go, no, I think this is going to be a thing. And literally, you know, we've got 4 or 5 investments today in companies that do machine generated content. You know, at a group level, we believe, you know, what we're setting out to do is we think that all companies 3 to 5 years from now will have connected data, content, and media in real time, and they will be optimizing that, you know, through AI and a tech platform. I don't think, and I'm not saying that because I think we have a totally unique view on the future. I think many people would subscribe to that and believe exactly the same thing. At the moment, you've got some very small D2C brands in, you know, one region or one country who are doing quite a good job at that.
Yep.
But no one is doing it at scale. And technology is going to be so critically important to that, because the old model of have a genius creative come up with something and hope that when you spend a fortune sticking it in the Super Bowl, it actually performs.
Right.
I mean, you can just test so many thousands of different versions and not do the theory of whether they work. You can see if they're working and just optimize in real time. And that will just become the way that all marketing is done. And I think, you know, the big traditional agency, I think there's going to be a role for small creative agencies. So in a world where it's hard to buy attention and you have to earn it, you know, the Drogers of the world, the Widens of the world, the Johannes Leonardos of the world are going to do very well, because small agencies full of brilliant creatives will do well. But the big global networks will just go away, you know, because you just don't need them anymore.
Right.
And I think one of the, you know, just jumping into your types of creative tech, the reason we call the group a brand tech group is we thought there were so many ways beyond advertising that you would be able to connect people and brands. And we didn't want to be limited to say, oh yeah, these people are going to do advertising. And one of the very early examples, which was great, was with Niantic. So we were the first, one of the very first external investors in Niantic back in the summer of 2015 when they spun out of Google. 2016, they launched Pokemon Go. And they had some really interesting successes. I mean, brands like McDonald's, you know, had huge increases in sales where, you know, no one had actually seen the McDonald's brand. No one had seen a McDonald's ad. They just put a Pokestop inside a McDonald's and it had driven people into the McDonald's, who then purchased. And it was just a great example of how can you use technology to drive growth that has nothing whatsoever to do with advertising.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me. It sort of seems obvious when you take the lens of, you know, having observed either as an operator in your case or as a, you know, deal maker in our case, this notion of the, you know, technology when applied to certain functions can serve both as an accelerator in terms of efficiency. So it, you know, that's the faster, cheaper sort of side of things. But also to efficacy. And I think on the tech's application to sort of brand, you know, creative is a perfect example where it actually, sure, it'll save you dollars by having machines do it at scale and with iterations that humans could only dream of, but that will actually make the advertising work better. That is to say, drive the efficacy of it. And I think, you know, it's sort of, to me, the efficacy part is like the 9/10 of the iceberg that's below the waterline. It's a little bit harder to get at. We tend to approach problems with solving efficiency first in terms of tech application, but I think the bigger opportunity is making the marketing work better and therefore driving efficacy. And if we're successful in having the marketplace realize that, then I think you've probably caught the tiger by the tail.
Yeah, and again, it comes because the people who have historically been creative and very good on the craft piece don't get the tech piece, and the people who get the tech piece don't get the craft piece. And so what you've seen to date is there's still some phenomenal creative that goes on in the old world, but it tends to live in the old world. And then you've got lots of great tech things happening, but a lot of the actual quality and craft of the creative that's being generated by technology isn't yet great. And what's going to happen over the coming, and I think it's going to happen pretty quickly, is that you'll just get to a point where it is totally driven by technology, but it's also really powerful and really good.
Yeah, you know, that reminds me of we seem to have this dichotomy, or perhaps better said, false dichotomy between this notion of either you're for the data and the science and the tech, or you're this creative type. I think you're right in the sense that people tend to, you know, grok one world or another, and you know, the crossover I find tends to be a funny space. You see it manifest itself at conferences like Cannes Lion, where they try to, it almost seems like, you know, jury rig, or just, you know, jam together these two notions, where often you'll see, you know, creative versus data or creative versus tech. And I throw my hands up whenever I see that, because to me, it feels like, you know, you always need great creative, right? Creative storytelling is essential in all forms of marketing. And what technology brings to the table is an ability to, sure, make it maybe faster, better, cheaper, but also it kind of acts almost like as a bullhorn, right? As a loudspeaker, such that if you have great creative, it will make its way to the world a lot faster. Witness you know, a brilliant sort of TikTok viral, you know, video. These things explode as a function of technology, whereas in the analog world, they simply would not have garnered that attention. So to me, these are hand in glove. These are very, very complementary applications of technology to what is historically been thought of as the art of creative.
Yeah, and you'll be, you know, and we've already got companies doing this already, but, you know, you can create, let's imagine you're doing food videos, you can create 100 different versions, you can have a completely different thumbnail at the start of each one, you can have a completely different edit, you can play around with so many different elements, you can spend 1% of your budget behind it, see what's working best, come down to a list of 10, spend another percent of the budget, and then spend 98% of the budget behind the work that's actually delivering. And the ROI you just get on stuff like that is through the roof. We're, you know, investors in a really interesting DCO business called Givox, who just bring together first-party data, third-party data, you know, climate, environment, all those kind of things. And just the way you can make content so much more relevant to people, I think is amazing. And we're going to see enormous progress in that. And I think in particular in how we probably even define what that content is. One of the companies I'm really very excited about that we invested in a couple of years ago is a company called AI Foundation. And they showed off their tech recently when they took digital Deepak Chopra onto Jimmy Kimmel, and he took everyone through a guided meditation. But they can basically build a twin of you that you know you can train to be able to talk like you, respond like you, and you will be able to have a completely fully interactive conversation with it. The potential that gives for brands and communication and messaging, obviously the potential it gives for people to do bad stuff with it is huge. And
right.
They have a whole business called Reality Defender, which is set up to head off people doing bad things. But the potential that has for brands to be able to tell their stories, particularly founders, to be able to engage in people in completely different ways at scale, you know, because kind of conversations have tended to be one-to-one and limited to date, and then broadcast is one-to-many, but it's not very personal. And you'll be able to get into a world of incredibly personal, relevant one-to-one conversations. So, you know, I think that's kind of where artificial intelligence will go. And in the short term, it's just going to be basically assembling and creating content that is so much more relevant at unbelievable scale.
Well, I think that notion just sent a shudder through our audience as they contemplate a digital clone of Terry Kawaja. That I mean, just telling really, really bad jokes all over the place.
We should do that. We should do that.
We should not. I have been fascinated to see in the instances where you have these people-powered creative marketplaces. I guess the production side of whether it's the content or the ad copy and creative, has historically been very sort of anachronistic and expensive and sort of very sort of a lot of lead times associated with it, and I'm fascinated by some of these marketplaces. I think you have some in the portfolio. Social Native is another one where they basically opened up to creators all over the world, whether they're moonlighting from their day job or they're using this as their primary source of employment, where they're basically building creatives at considerably cheaper cost that it turns out are of fantastic quality. So they'll put out an RFP for I don't know, a Coke ad where they want a girl on a beach drinking a Coke, and maybe they'll supply a couple lines, and all of a sudden they'll have not a few, not hundreds, thousands of contributions from all over the world. They have contributors from every conceivable country that will take that and make their own creative ads formats per the RFP, submit it, and all of a sudden this becomes very, very viable copy for these ad agencies. I got to think that both excites procurement and the CFO at the agency, and strikes fear into some of the production departments of these agencies, because it's got to just have a massive impact in terms of upending what has long been a very sort of stultified aspect of the business.
Yeah, I mean, completely. And that was the very first acquisition we actually made, was one of those businesses for that exact reason, because I remember looking at what it was doing to our business when I was running Havas. And someone asked the question, what's the a people-powered creative marketplace on the Q&A? And I think the simple answer to that is this thing just turned every single person into a content creator. So, when I went into the ad industry, the only people who got to create were the 100 or so in the corner expensive office, and no one else ever came anywhere near creation. Whereas today, pretty much everybody on this webinar will have created, shared content today, and so many people are brilliant at it. And so the whole kind of idea behind, and they don't have to be marketplaces, but the whole idea behind people-powered marketing or people-powered creative or content is just that ordinary people, in exactly the same way as you could choose to go and drive an Uber or choose to rent your apartment out on Airbnb, you can also choose to create content. And there are so many people who are brilliant at it. In fact, I would actually argue that, your average 21-year-old is probably way better at creating content for you to live on TikTok than a 50-something creative director who probably isn't on TikTok. And so it's just about tapping into that. And the other thing is, because they're doing it as one of many things, they may well have be a student, have a day job, et cetera, whilst, they are quite happy. They think getting 10 or 20 grand doing something is amazing.
Right.
Whereas you go to an agency, they don't want to get out of bed for less than 2 million. And I think what you've seen particularly with the crisis is, you've not been able to travel, you've not been allowed to shoot. So a lot of these people-powered content businesses, I mean, we have one called MoFilm, there's another one called Tongle, but they've got local filmmakers on the ground in all of these markets who can shoot. They've got people who can shoot from home. So I think you're seeing quite a wave and a shift from traditional production into new model. And at its core, whilst the mobile phone didn't create more cars for potential Uber drivers to drive, and it didn't create more apartments or houses for potential renters on Airbnb to rent out, but it did create more content creators. It's, every single person in the world is now a content creator.
Right. So if this is obviously a better way to approach, creative content creation, what are the roadblocks? Why is this not a, $100 billion industry? Like, why are we where we are today, which we're describing it as on the come and inflecting, which is the whole rationale. You obviously identified something from your agency days that drove you to launch you and Mr. Jones' business focused on brand tech. But where do you see? I want to talk a little bit further about this notion of incentives, or who's being the roadblock? Or is it the brand? Is it the agency? Why is this not more proliferated today?
So I think firstly, the agency, an enormous, they obviously see this as a huge threat, and therefore will try and do everything that they can to stop it happening. And then there's myths and realities. And, the number one myth people will go is, but the quality of the content's crap. If you spend 2 million, 3 million with us, it'll be great, but that person can't do great content. And that's just a nonsense. Go spend 2 minutes on Instagram, and you'll see that there's some people do some pretty special things. Then you also have with anything, and I think this is particularly true in the influencer space, there is a new influencer business that launches every day at the moment.
Right.
There are some amazing influencer businesses who will deliver brilliantly for brands, and there are some complete charlatans out there. And so I think part of the challenge and the problem as well with anything is when something is new and successful, loads and loads of businesses get launched. And as in any space, there are some great ones and there are some not so great ones. And I think in particular, the influencer space has just grown so explosively. And in essence, influencer businesses are just people paired creative with media. So it just so happens that not only will they create the content for you, but they have big media audiences.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think you'll see all of this accelerate further post the crisis, just because people who thought that remote working models, dispersed crowds, working from home weren't things that necessarily would work. Every single person has just had a crash course in that for the last 8 weeks. So it's kind of, oh, wow, actually, maybe the idea of having 10,000 people in a building is a bit old-fashioned and dumb, particularly if I'm paying for it. And the idea of like tapping into a dispersed crowd all over the world as and when I need them is a bit smarter.
Yeah.
But I think the ones that are good are growing like crazy. I mean, our businesses in that space in Q1 have grown amazingly.
Damon Berger makes the comment that, look, I think demographics will take care of a lot of this, in the sense that whether it's the C-suite at the brands sort of aging out as the 50-year-olds sort of see the world differently. But I think a lot of it has to do with the target audiences, with the baby boomer sort of bulge as that sort of migrates through the ecosystem, and we get a greater weighting of sort of actionable, people, audiences that spend money shifting younger. Certainly that will have an effect as well, because that demographic doesn't care about yesterday's sort of types of media or creative that maybe have worked for them but won't work for younger people.
Oh yeah, no, look, I completely agree with Damon. I think and that's true both of old-fashioned views of content quality, where people thought it needed to be shot, in incredibly high quality. And if you're looking at something on a mobile phone in 6 seconds, actually overly produced and higher production values can be a downside, not a positive. But it's also very relevant to the where. The Travis Scott concert in Fortnite got over 12 million audience. I mean, people who are in the Fortnites of the world, the Animal Crossings, just the way brands have opportunities to engage in these, I wouldn't even call Fortnite new, but in the new content platforms, it's so different than everything that's gone before, and they're growing like crazy. I mean, the growth in gaming was already massive, and what's happening through the crisis is it's going off the charts.
Yeah, you mentioned at the outset of the call these sort of more technology literate direct-to-consumer brands were sort of having a bit of a heyday here in the crisis. Jack Hallahan asked the question about, well, who's taking advantage of this sort of crisis? I was looking at some Celtra research this morning that indicated that there certainly was a lot more activity amongst e-commerce brands Again, e-commerce and direct-to-consumer, sort of lumping those together. Is this a big opportunity, and might this represent an inflection point in terms of this more technology application to creative?
Yeah, I absolutely think so. I mean, I think what you're seeing is many, and obviously, depending on the sector people are playing in, there's a difference to the extent to which their brands and businesses have been hit. But you're seeing many major brands just saying, look, we're not shooting any new content anywhere around the world. So they need to be repurposing content. At the same time, you have audience levels that are just, you know, as high as they've ever been on all the social platforms. So the ability to use technology to create, repurpose, and basically put together an amount of content that would, you know, have in traditional methods just not have been possible to create without spending a fortune. Brands are all having a crash course in that. So why would you go back to the old way of doing it when you've just basically demonstrated that you can use much more technology and digital to do it, and do it at a fraction of the price, and see exactly the same? Well, we'll see what people are seeing from an ROI perspective. But, you know, I think you've got behavior changes happening here that are permanent and won't go back. We won't go back to the old way.
Yep.
This will accelerate the shift, you know, to digital and to tech-enabled models. As you said, e-commerce, you know, every brand is either, if they're good at e-commerce already, they're looking to enhance their e-commerce capabilities. And if they're not that good, they're looking to stand up good, profitable e-commerce capabilities really quickly.
And what about CTV? I mean, the promise that, you know, Brian Lesser was running Xandr was talking a big game about changing the nature of the 30-second, you know, TV ad formats away from the traditional 30-second spot. They talked about lighter ad loads, which we do see in streaming. But Mike Kelly asked the question, are we seeing any sort of, you know, looking at the AVOD streaming companies? I'm not necessarily, other than maybe 15-second spots instead of 30, I'm not seeing a wholesale change in terms of ad formats of AVOD streaming TV content versus more traditional. Are you?
No, look, I mean, I think I have a personal view on all of this, but it may not be right. But I think we're just going to end up, as you know, if the world continues to split. On the one hand, you know, the huge rise of all the streaming platforms. Who, you know, Disney have just gone past 50 million paid subscribers. So I think you're going to have the continued march of the Netflix, the Disney Pluses, all of that. And on the other hand, the social platforms, where for the most part, you know, ads are kind of the penalty if you don't want to pay to have an ad-free version of it, but they're built into the YouTubes and the Facebooks and the Instagrams of the world, and that both of those things are going to continue to grow. And what has been, you know, traditional TV and traditional TV advertising will decline and become less and less important now. That, you know, is what time frame this happens over and how fast we will see. But I think we could end up in a world where traditional TV becomes what radio is today.
Right. Yeah, as we migrate. Hey, I want to get your take on a couple of ad sort of format or approaches. One is native, and I know that's a broad term that it can apply to a whole variety of things, but you know, I'm in the context where it's not a journalistic story posing as editorial, an ad posing as editorial, but rather, let's say, where you've got in a video context a brand is integrated into the storyline, or, you know, into the scene as a softer, different approach towards a sort of blatantly interruptive model of a traditional ad. What's your perspective in terms of the opportunity there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. I'm kind of neutral on native to slightly negative. I think part of the challenge is, you know, if you do it so well, it probably actually doesn't have a great impact for your brand. And the more, you know, the more overt you are, people aren't dumb and they understand what's going on. I mean, I think it's potentially more relevant in areas like gaming, where you can actually do things that add value within the game and are relevant. So just, a simple example, Niantic had a game called Ingress, and there were these bases, and if you wanted to protect them, you could buy a shield from AXA, an insurance company, and it was just a kind of simple and quite logical fit. But I think, I don't think it becomes an enormous giant industry. I think people are much better off. Going back to your earlier slide, I can't remember the term you use, we talk about utility. I mean, at the end of the day, if you are useful and helpful in people's lives, people don't hate brands. They just hate brands that are interrupting them and annoying them. And so if you add value in people's lives and can find, the way of doing that, you don't need to work too hard about hiding that or integrating it in a way that's native.
Yep. Yep.
And, so I'm neutral. I don't think it's like, a bad idea, but I don't think that suddenly we'll be sitting here doing one of these in 5 years and, you'll have sold 20 businesses in the native category and it will be a 10 billion industry.
Well, I hope I will have sold 20 businesses in native, but I hear you in terms of the, scaled application. Final category I want to get your feedback on is the augmented reality. I think we would all agree that there's seemingly great potential here. We actually covered this as one of the emerging trends in my discussion with Jeff Ramsey the other week. We were, I think, split decision as to whether it would have a material impact on marketing in the next 3 years. I was definitely thumbs down. And I think, the sort of poster child for the challenges there is we heard from this week, as Magic Leap seems to be suffering. What is your take in terms of both the potential for the applications of AR, as well as some semblance of a time frame on when we can expect that to have a material impact in the marketplace?
So we're massively bullish on AR, and we invested in Niantic back in 2015, and we made we backed augmented reality versus virtual reality because we just felt that and John, the founder of Niantic, kept saying, so everyone's got one of these. So you're like, everyone's got the device. They don't need to put a stupid headset on that's hot and uncomfortable and makes them not feel so great. And I have to say, I think Magic Leap is the WeWork of the tech industry. It's kind of nonsense how much money they've raised and what they haven't done with it. And again, things like that just create an overall umbrella bad name for whether it's augmented reality, mixed reality, virtual reality. So we think it'll be huge. I mean, I think, Pokemon Go was the fastest technology in history to get to 50 million users. And it demonstrates the potential. How quickly, I think we're going to see the next 3 to 5 years. I don't think anything massive is going to be happening this year, but it's also what starts to happen around it. There's a really interesting business called Everything, who an IoT business, but they can allow you to trace every single product, where it's come from, so that people know where a product's come from, so that brands know where a product's gone. You can actually have every single product trigger an AR experience. So, one of the challenges in the past has been you needed to print codes on products to allow people to have an augmented reality experience. And the famous story of the brand who didn't have time to print it on the pack, so they printed it on a poster, and funnily enough, no one engaged. The barcode standard changed last year. So as the new barcodes roll out, every single barcode will have the ability to be used to trigger an AR experience. So we think it'll be massive. Is it going to be massive in 3 and 5 years before then? But it's a time frame like that.
Yeah, I would agree with that it will be massive, and there's just no end to the variety of applications one can conceive of in terms of AR, and that will likely only exponentially explode going forward. And then
you saw the Google the Google Maps thing where bottom left in
Oh,
certain markets, you can now click and it pops up in AR. There's just so much potential for it.
absolutely, absolutely. Then the question is, but when does that become, material and real and have practical applications and start usurping some of the dollars spent in the more traditional channels will be interesting to see. I think it ultimately, like any of these, I think if you demonstrate efficacy, right, if it does a better job, you will get the share of spend ultimately.
Just think about mobile. At the start of the last decade, mobile wasn't the thing, in about 2012, Zuckerberg famously said, we've missed mobile, and it was none of their revenue. And then by the end of the decade, it was 98, 99% of their revenue. So these things can move fast. We'll need to be out and about again, though, for them to be really useful.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true. The Facebook, that was one of the best pivots of all time, the pivot to mobile. Uh, David, this has been fantastic. As expected, the sort of application of technology to the creative world in a manner that hopefully does a better job going forward of pleasing and considering and respecting the consumer. Thank you very much for your expert input. Um, well, there you have it, folks. Creative and the consumer. Please join us next Wednesday, May the 6th, when I will invite my colleague Connor McKenna to join me in a conversation with Sheila Spence of Spotify to talk about the future of podcasting as part of our very exciting second season of the Work From Home webinar. Here we go, folks. We are live. That's our new creative team at work. Thank you, Ashley and Adam. And as always, we finish up every one of these Zoom webinars where you have that what would otherwise be an awkward moment once everyone says goodbye and then you look for the to close out the app. You get that sort of awkward few moments where the mic is hot, and this is our solution to that. So thank you, David, for joining us. Thank you all for tuning in. We will see you next Wednesday.